How did Leahy come up with all this stuff? Did he just invent it on his own?
Well, what happened is that he invented it without knowing that he invented it. So basically, he was trained in soft tissue work, but his biggest addition to the concept is the word active. So he made the tissue move while applying the tension. While before, people were stationary. But he only discovered that he stumbled upon something when people would come to see him for carpal tunnel syndrome, and everybody in Colorado Springs got 100% resolution.
Meanwhile, the surgery was causing more problems than the actual problem.
Yeah.
Right?
And then what happened is that orthopedic surgeons started to say, well, maybe you should start teaching this method. So he went to San Diego, met with a very famous orthopedic surgeon, and then they developed the protocols and actually did studies. And it showed that it worked for carpal tunnel. And then, he applied it to lower back pain, to elbow pain, to shoulder pain. And he's the type of guy that keeps perfecting it. He probably already invented a move since we started this interview. He's the type of guy that's always strives for constant improvement. He's probably one of the biggest geniuses out there in healing arts.
Wow, and coming from you. That's a huge statement. And the fact that he doesn't rest on his laurels, he's still changing it and evolving the technique is probably a good thing as well. Yeah,
he constantly tries to improve it, which gives him a big advantage, and then he keeps coming up with new courses or new ways to teach it. And at the end of the day, of all the soft tissue technique, I would say it's the Krav Maga of soft tissue work. In other words, if you compare it to martial arts, it's the one that's giving you the most results with the least amount of effort.
Yeah, I love it. Dr. Duran Castro, who you know is an instructor too, he does it on me all the time, probably more so when I was competing actively, but every time I have a pain, I'm like, why don't I just go to the Castro and have him work on me? And invariably, I'm so happy because I forget sometimes. You forget it's such a magical technique, really.
It is.
Talk to me a little bit about some of the athletes you've worked with, because you have some world-class ones that you've worked with. Who is your favorites, and who are the ones that achieved the greatest results from you?
Probably Adam Nelson. He's the most medaled shot putter in the history of the world. So he's been a world champion and Olympic medalist multiple times. One of the strongest guys I've ever coached. And also, yes, he was a world champion, but he's also very short for a shot putter. And there is such a thing as biomechanical advantage. I mean, most world champions are at least 6'6", and Adam's only 6'1". So to beat men taller means a lot. I mean, so he was one of the most powerful guys. Dwight Phillips, who was Olympic champion, world champion in long jumps, another very interesting guy I worked with. As far as teams, I really liked working on the national ski team. I mean, those guys are very dedicated, very strong. You work with the Olympic ski team? Yeah, in Canada, yes. And then bobsleigh. Most of my medal winners were winter sports. And then in '98, I moved to the U.S. and then started to work with the pros, and then working with hockey a lot. And then after that, pro athletes tend to hang around with each other. Then they start to bring me baseball players and football players and basketball players, all in the pros. And I grew my business like that. And then it was always a word to mouth, because back then, again, the internet was non-existent, and the athletes were not nerdy enough to go on the internet. The new generation, they all use their iPhones and Blackberries, but I'm talking about the guys that I coached in '98. The internet, to get an email was kind of odd. From an athlete, they weren't very cognizant. I mean, I remember most of the pro athletes that I worked with in the late '90s, their wives knew how to operate an email, but not them. So, but now that this has changed a lot, but those are probably the guys I enjoy working the most. You work with Donovan Bailey too, right? I worked with his chiropractor, and then, but I can't. I work more with the girls. Two of the girls who won in Sydney, and then I worked with a a guy that won the gold in a relay in Sydney. I worked with a lot of speed skaters. Probably the sport where I've had the most
success
is speed skating.
Interesting. And is that because these guys really, need, in other words, coaching really helps them to achieve greater levels of success?
Yeah, I mean, strength training was, for example, at the World Championships in '94, I think we had 17 medals just for Canada alone.
Wow.
So, that's a lot of medals for World Championships. And I worked with the Americans. I went back and forth between Canada and the U.S. for years. But every time I went with one country, that country would go up, and the country I left with. After a while, my market value was very well established in speed skating. And now, my former boss in speed skating is contracted with the Russians. So I start working for the Russians now.
The United States better get a hold of you before we lose you to another country. You'll be having three citizenships.
Take up Russian citizenship.
That's right. You'll give up the U.S. citizenship. What's the most gratifying for you? What do you like to work with? What kind of athletes?
I think probably the guys who set world records is most gratifying, because if you work with a pro athlete, okay, they do better. You can increase their salary. You can increase their market value. That's nice, but when somebody sets a world record, that means that person that day does something that no other human's ever done, right? And I've produced world record holders in 10 different sports.
Do you feel like a father watching it, like on TV or in person, whatever? Do you feel like that, like, holy shit, that's like, I feel like I'm up there with these guys?
Yeah, I'm very proud of when they do well, but my brain is wired to, after they've set the record, to, okay, how can I improve, So I don't sit on my laurels too long, because it's, you're only as good as your latest result.
Right.
Yeah. So if you don't produce constantly, then you're worth nothing, actually. I think in my field, I mean, there's some guys that produced somebody in 1984 and they still live on that, but they obviously don't have the clients now. You're only as good as your last client. That's,
right. Well, you're driven. You're driven. You haven't got burnt out on it yet, is what you're saying.
No. But what's a nice thing now is that my students, in my certification program, we only give level 5 if they produce an Olympic medalist. So now I'm happier to see my students produce Olympic medalists.
So you actually have this strength and conditioning course that you teach. You have 5 levels to it?
Yeah, and level 1 is basically you could coach at the regional level. Level 3 is national level. 4 is international, but not top-notch yet. It's the only certification system actually in the world that asks you to produce results by level 3. So in other words, if you don't put people on the national team, you don't get your further levels.
So you can't come and take the next level until you get a certain athlete to achieve a certain level of success.
Correct. So level 5, they need to have an Olympic medalist. But what I find is that the guys who reach level 5 don't back down. They tend to produce more and more. So, for example, I got a guy in level 5 that's with jiu-jitsu, and now he is now producing in baseball and track and field and all sorts of other sports. So, and then I only have some 18 level 5s now, but if you look at the math, that's at least 18 other medals produced by my training philosophy. So that's good. And then it keeps everybody, because if you're not accountable, to give a certification, and plus we have a very strict, any exams, they got to get 92%.
Wow, that's hard. Yeah,
just to pass. That's the passing mark. So we're very strict, and then the practicals are very strict. And the key is, it's like, if I refer you somebody who's level 5, then I know for sure he can help you out.
Sure, you don't want to just pass people, because then it shows that your certification might not be quite as good as you're leading people to believe it is.
Correct. And then, for example, we have a kid who's level 4 now, and he should reach level 5 from Germany. But I got him to produce world championship medals at the University Games in speed skating with the country of Hungary, which is not a great country for speed skating, and they actually beat Canada, which is a strong skating country. So the Canadians actually offered him a job.
It's everyone's stealing everyone.
Yeah, so it's that I like to see. Or, for example, in the UFC recently, had two students who each had their own guy competing against each other. So, for the world title. So that's nice to see.
Yeah, that's very nice. Then, is there any students you've had that you're like, my God, this guy is so good. He might be better than me even,
Well, in Japan, the philosophy is you're not a good teacher unless you have somebody better than you as a student.
I got you.
So I'm striving to build the guy that's going to beat me, and there's about 4 or 5 guys lined up for a title.
Hasn't happened yet, though.
Not yet, because the thing, to be fair to them, I started so early, that I had a big advantage. I'm 50, and those guys are in their late 20s and 30s, so they got a bit way to go. But at their age, I was ahead of them. But you got to realize that the strength coach profession was pretty much non-existent. In 1984, the average strength coach salary in the U.S. was $15,000 a year.
Oh my God, sounds like a bodybuilder salary.
Yeah, but now in the NCAA, there's at least 10 guys who make over $250,000.
The money is that good? I didn't realize the money was that good.
Yeah, there's guys who make $350 plus bonuses and cars and houses, and so actually the NCAA pays more than the pros.
Really?
Yeah. The only place where I know where someone makes more is in European soccer, where there's 2 guys who make €2 million each a year. Yeah. Wow. But 20 years ago, that was unfathomable. No one made that much money. But it goes to show that teams are now recognizing, it's just a number of man days. A good strength coach can reduce numbers of man days lost by 40%. So if you get a $60 million payroll, and just to make simple math, you lose $6 million a year on man days, and you reduce 40% of that, then you save the team $2.4 million.
So right? The strength and conditioning coach is cheap actually to hire him, even if you pay him $500,000.
So in soccer, to pay $2 million is worth it because the salaries are so much higher that in all percentages it saves a lot of money. Sure,
no, that makes sense. Now you have 2 clinics you run, right? And one in Colorado Springs and one in Rhode Island.
Actually, the one in Rhode Island is our main center. We have plans we have one in Chicago. And then we're opening up one in Dublin in the next few months.
Oh, wow.
And then the next one after that should be Florida.